Hello, my name's Ethan,
I'm Ben.
I'm Kabir.
and welcome to our 25th episode on Mind Matters.
Yeah, so today we were recording our first episode of the new year of 2026, and we haven't posted in just a little bit over a month, right? Because it's been the holiday season, crunch time finals for us, and then winter break. But we're excited to get back and recording for this new year. It'll be a good new year. And today, with the New Year's resolutions and the start of the new year, we're going to be talking about goal setting, probably something a lot of people are thinking about at this time of the year.
Yeah, so I think something that, when we were planning this episode, I recently read this book called Atomic Habits by James Clear, and it's a great book. I recommend it to everyone, but I have a lot of takeaways from that I kind of want to discuss today because it's very applicable to goal setting. So I think goals in general, like when people think of goals, a big misconception is that they make it so it sounds very good, right? But they don't actually break down how they're going to get there, right? So it's like a direction, but it's like, how am I actually going to, work towards that every single day? So the first main takeaway that I had from this book, Atomic Habits, is focus on your systems and not your goals. So that means goals set directions, but systems actually create progress. And these systems are basically your daily actions, right? So if your goal is to get fit, the system that you have in place is going to be, I'm going to train 3 times per week at 7 a.m. plus prep my gym clothes the night before. That's a system, and that's really how you get, started in that direction towards your goal.
hmm And I think there are so many practical tips that people have discovered working for goal setting, but I think there's got to be a deeper emotional core behind it too, right? No matter how many no matter how many strategies you have, no matter how many techniques like smart goals and stuff, you need to align the things that you want to achieve with your personal values. And I think one of the things that I have been doing recently, especially with college applications and finals and all of that, is figuring out goals that will enable me to achieve some kind of personal ideal in the future, whether that's confidence, security, a feeling of freedom. I think visualizing a personal ideal that you have for yourself that deeply aligns with not only the practical component every day of setting up a goal and following through with it, but also just you know things, visualizing yourself in the future having completed a goal, having what will that environment be like for you if you achieve this. I think putting yourself in that mindset will not only allow you to gain the motivation to follow through on the practical tips that you might have set up for yourself, but also it just gives you a much clearer view of why you're doing the things that you're doing. So potentially if you encounter any difficulties along that way, it you get grounded, right? It's a way of grounding yourself in values and your ideals for who you want to be in the future.
Yeah, I think another important thing that I like to emphasize a lot in my goal setting is visualization. And before I want to say this, I want to preface it, as with all of our episodes, we're not, all knowing or perfect in any of these regards, right? And
Mm.
one of our goals is to, share experiences, right? And obviously, I'm sure Ethan and Kabir you have as well, but sometimes it's very, very difficult to attain, goals, and obviously different goals, you know, for different people. I've definitely struggled with that, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, but one of the main things that has helped me is visualization, and it kind of goes back to a quote. I don't know who originally said it or who says it mainly, but it's whether you believe you can do it or you can't do it, you're right. And
Absolutely.
I think a lot of the times when people say a goal is unrealistic because there's so many people trying to get there, all the people who all of the people who just don't think it's all the people who think it's unrealistic are automatically eliminated. So the second you think something is realistic, it becomes realistic because so few people think it's realistic. And you have to really visualize yourself, whether it's like Ethan said, like in working out, being fit, like whatever, academic achievements, business achievements, working on a project, finishing a project, getting a reward, whether it's financial freedom, right? You have to really visualize yourself and believe that you can attain it. And obviously, there's a lot of hard work to go into that. It's very difficult, um, but that's the first step, and that's the step that that so few people take, and that's why many people think goals, uh, high reaching goals are unattainable.
Yeah, and kind of to add on to both of you guys kind of got to the fact that it kind of starts within, right? And the second big takeaway that I had from the Atomic Habits book is set identity-based goals. So you shouldn't rely on results, and you should more so aim for the person you want to become, right? So Kabir was talking about finding a sense of security or those personal attributes, and Ben was talking about like visualizing it yourself. But it really starts within. And I like to think about it like every habit is a vote for your identity, right? So if you're like, I want to run a marathon, right? That's a big, lofty goal that some people set. But it starts with thinking, I'm a runner, right? I'm someone who makes healthy decisions. I'm someone who stays active, right? And if you can really, fortify that that personal belief in yourself, right? And the type of person you are, I think the rest actually comes naturally, right? Because if you think I'm a runner, right, you're going to have an itch, right? An urge to get out and go run, right? It's going to come naturally. So really, really starts within. I think that's something that you guys hit on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, saying I'm the type of person who does, so and so, that is perfect because, going with the idea of, visualization, obviously that works, but I also think that describing yourself as a certain type of person helps you kind of resist. A lot of times in society, lots of goals are motivated not by what we want to do, but by what society or by what, the people around us suggest we should be doing, right? So that can be financial goals, academic goals, anything, right? But the point is, you need to find a way to convince yourself, even if those goals are externally motivated to a certain extent, you need to be able to find a way to convince yourself that you are the originator of that idea, right? As opposed to your environment convincing you that, oh, you need to achieve this level of education, this level of, success by this age, right? Finding a way to weave that idea into your own sense of, who you want to be is absolutely essential, because if you don't, right, if you're just going by, oh, my mom or my dad or my friends say that, oh, this is what I should be doing by this point in time, right, you really don't have an internal, sense of, um you don't have a sense of propulsion. You're just kind of doing what everyone else is telling you to do. And finding a way to, kind of get around that involves convincing yourself that you have that goal is an essential part of, who you want to be, and not just, the people around you telling you that.
And I think when you focus on what like Kabir, you said society kind of the what societal standards are and what your vision of yourself is based on that, or what your family thinks or what other people thinks. It's hard to focus on small steps. You're just focused on like long-term lofty goals, and it's impossible to get started when you're doing that. And I was watching a podcast with a very famous investor who at one point was, at a very um, low point in his personal life, but also, his hedge fund or whatever he ran was down a ton of money. So he's at a very, very low point in his life. Um, and he talked, and now he's, he made a miraculous comeback actually when I was worth billions and billions of dollars, and he's doing very well. But he said that throughout that process, it was just little steps every single day, just a little progress on his personal life, a little progress on, the investments, and not really focusing on that huge mountain to climb because, if you look up, at a mountain and you're at the bottom of it, it's intimidating. It seems almost insurmountable. But if you just look at the next steps over and over again, um, it becomes attainable.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I really want to add on to that. Ben, you remind me of like the third takeaway I had from the Atomic Habits book. So I know we've been speaking very like a little bit more abstract, but this next kind of idea is kind of a way to create tangible steps, right? So the third takeaway that I had was make goals stupidly small. So like Ben said, when you look at a mountain, right, like that finance guy was looking at, right, it can look so insurmountable that you don't even get started, right? But if you look at each little rock that you have to climb, that's way easier. So when you make your goals stupidly small and that kind of creates habits that are very like too easy to fail. And it kind of allows you to get started because once you get started, right, that builds momentum, which creates consistency, and consistency beats motivation. So, a very practical example for you guys is if your goal is to read more, a lot of people are like, all right, I'm going to read 30 minutes daily, right? Which is what pops into my mind, right, when I think of reading more as a goal. But in Atomic Habit, which is a reference to the book, in a way to make the habit, right, too easy to fail is read one page after breakfast, right? That's so easy. And eventually that will become so easy, then you can read 10 and then 20 and then a whole chapter per day, right? That's kind of how you get the ball rolling in the right direction. And I think this is a step that people, really, really skip and don't really take into account when they're starting these big, lofty goals.
Mhm. And I think, right, that minimum viable step, the thing that you do to get yourself out of bed in the morning to prevent, procrastination is a very real thing, right? If you don't think, oh my God, I have so much stuff to do. How am I ever going to, get the motivation to even take this small step? I think part of the goal is the discomfort, right? If you're thinking about reaching some future, ideal, that gap between where you are now and where you want to be in the future, the only thing separating you between those 2 points is the discomfort, right? I think if you're not kind of if you're not thrown off by something you have to do along the way, then you're not really getting any meaningful change. So I think part of what good goal setting entails is obviously there are values that you want to follow, right? Personal values, but even more than that, you need to understand that the obstacles that you encounter are the marker of, you getting somewhere. It's not just, oh, why did I put myself down this painful, um almost, yeah, this insurmountable path? Why did I do this? It's because you wanted to experience the discomfort to get to that greater point. I know we don't often think of it that way, but I think, if you're going to try to achieve something, very frequently, right, the moment that something comes up and, you know, throws us off or makes us seem like the path is just, we can't get far enough on the path. There's still that that moment when you realize, oh, there's something blocking my way. There's this huge obstacle that needs to be seen more as a moment of transformation than as a moment that you're getting set back, right? That's a very frequent sentiment, but I think goal setting is where that applies even probably the most importantly, right? Because if you want to get anywhere in life, there has to be some level of discomfort that you find along the way that, catalyzes that transformation, right? Otherwise, you're just stuck in the same position. And so every obstacle that you encounter, you know, get through it however you can, right? But that minimum step that, Ethan, you were talking about, I think, right, that's the easiest way, I think, to make that initial step. But you also have to realize, the extent of discomfort, the extent of difficulty that you will be encountering along the way, and frame that as more of a transformation than anything else.
Going back to the second takeaway from the book, set identity-based goals. When your goals are based on identity and who you are, I think that that pain is almost relieving to feel. And I think, like for me, one of the things that I greatly enjoy and one of the things I greatly, um, enjoy thinking about is math, right? And a
Yep.
lot of times when, I don't, understand something, right? Or I'm fighting to, understand something, it's actually relieving because, I understand that progress is being made, right? If it all came easy, then, anybody could do it and there'd be almost no value in it. But, when I when I feel that there is struggle, but I can, fight through it, and I can, achieve what I want to understand. That's a very good feeling because it's, somewhat part of my identity, right? So I think, when you compile these small goals and a true understanding of what you want your identity to be, just the hard part of actually executing your goals becomes almost enjoyable.
Yeah, I think, like you guys said, like discomfort is it's inevitable, right? And if you don't feel any discomfort, chances are you're not moving in a direction where you're going to grow or at least change into a different version of yourself. So I think, people see discomfort and they choose to kind of fall back on, okay, they try to convince themselves, right, that they're making progress. But I think, this other huge takeaway is that like if you want to get somewhere, discomfort is inevitable and that's something you just have to realize.
Mhm. And thinking about the idea of discomfort or obstacles, it's actually reminding me of have any of you guys heard of Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL guy?
I think.
So he has this kind of philosophy of extreme ownership, which is like if you are encountering any difficulty in your goal or what you're trying to achieve, you have to take full ownership of it, right? You cannot pin that blame on anyone else. And even if why this is really important, I think, is because if you if you excuse yourself, if you're like, oh, I couldn't achieve this because this person was impeding me or this particular thing was whatever it might be, that obstacle, even if that person is responsible in part or in whole, if you take that liberty of, excusing yourself, that's a form of intellectual laziness, right? You are trying to pin the blame on someone else instead of taking responsibility for the thing that's been happening to you and taking steps to overcome it, right? So I think taking on a mindset of this like radical sense of ownership, it gives you a kind of, forward sense of movement. Because when you're thinking about, oh, all of this was my fault. I didn't achieve a goal, it's my fault. I don't care if this person didn't, do a certain thing. I should have been the one to tell them to do that thing. So putting yourself on that path of responsibility, of ownership is I think one of the best ways you can stop putting things off and start taking the steps taking all the necessary steps to get where you want to be instead of, taking the back seat in your own story, making excuses for yourself. When you're trying to achieve a goal, that is so important because of how many times you're going to experience such setbacks, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I think
Um,
so.
and taking that extreme ownership is so important.
Mhm. And I think like taking that ownership, right, and holding yourself accountable, and even just like the identity part of what we said, I think ties back to, we talk about this a ton, but if you're new, we often reference finding your why. So that's kind of the idea that, everyone has a reason for being on this earth, as cheesy as that sounds, right? Everyone has a purpose. And I think once you identify that purpose in kind of like your life mission, right? I think your goals become much more attainable. Like that seems to be the hardest step, just finding like what are the goals I want to work towards and that well I'll constantly feel not motivated, but more like I can hold myself accountable to to achieve. I think starting with your why is a really big part of this. And Kabir, I know you wrote some stuff down on our doc, so if you want to talk about that too.
Yeah, so I mean, the stuff I wrote, we've kind of covered a lot of it, right? That sense of, finding values and ideals that align with your goals that weave those things together, against the pressure of, social stressors. Like particularly in, this season of, where academic pressures are very, very heavy for a lot of people, right? There are things that others are telling you to do, your parents or guardians, your teachers, your friends, they are holding you to a certain standard. That to eviscerate that standard almost in your own, your own sense of achievement, finding a way to tie that together with your own story and also finding a way to take ownership of it, right? Like as we were just saying. And I think Ethan's practical strategies for that are, amazing, right? Atomic Habits, that's very good advice, right? But I think even, to the point of finding your why, getting getting far with a goal is more than just the practical tips that you take to whatever, get yourself up, and accomplish a task. It's more than that. It is how that goal aligns with your identity. And I think when you take ownership of that, when you take control of your identity, you start taking a forward, you start building momentum in your own life with smart goal setting strategies and that alignment with the realization that obstacles might be in your way. That taken together is, I think, the best formula if you want to, get far with what you want to achieve, and bridge that gap between who you are and the person you aspire to be.
Hmm.
Uh, um,
Yeah, Ben, go ahead.
sorry, go ahead, Ethan.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, I think, yeah, I just want to tie back into, one more time, the identity and why piece, because they go together, very nicely. And, for me, I think when we talk about, the difficulty of actually executing goals, and this goes back to setting, atomic habits, like little things that are so easy because, um, even when you don't have a why, there's no purpose, even those atomic habits can fail, right? If it's getting, if it's like, working out, getting fit, right? And you wake up and, you're tired and sore, and it's cold out, it's dreary, like it's very, very, very difficult. And that's just an example with, a physical goal. But there are many obstacles that come with mental goals as well, and including mental health mainly, right? And I think when you have that why, that purpose, and attach it with an identity, it becomes so much easier. So I think, before you set a goal, or use any of these strategies to help formulate a goal, I think it's a good question to ask. Do I have my why? Is this goal based on, an identity? Is this goal based on an underlying purpose? Like as Ethan said, it's a little cheesy. Is this based on like an underlying purpose of, my existence? Like why, right? So,
Mhm.
I think that's an important um, consideration to have when you're before even formulating a goal and using the strategies we've talked about.
Yeah. So like just to summarize today, here as we wrap up, the three takeaways I had from the Atomic Habits book. One, focus on your systems, not your goals, right? So goals create direction, but your systems are your daily actions, your routine, right? That really gets the ball rolling and creates actual progress. Two, Ben just, kind of wrapped it up, but set identity-based goals, right? Who you want to become, what kind of person you say you are, right? That creates a natural process, right? And allows you to have these habits that align with the person you want to be. And then lastly, make goals stupidly small. So instead of saying, right, I want to read 30 minutes daily, right, start with like 1 page per day. And that kind of gets the ball rolling and allows you to gain momentum, which leads to consistency. And ultimately, consistency is discipline, which beats motivation. So that's kind of a summary for the Atomic Habits book. If you haven't read that, it's a great book by James Clear. Kabir and Ben, have you guys read it?
No, I
No,
think
but
I'm gonna have
I
to.
have heard a lot of good things about it, though.
Yeah, so I definitely would encourage anyone listening to go read it. It's
Ethan, do you
amazing.
remember we had like an assistant chemistry teacher who loved that
Yeah,
book.
what was his name?
Wellington,
Wellington.
Mr. Wellington. Shout out
yeah.
Mr.
Mhm,
Wellington. Yeah.
mhm.
All right. Anything else, guys, before we wrap up?
Yeah, as we said, this is our first episode of the new year, and we'll be making more episodes right throughout the year, good episodes, and potentially featuring even more guests for you guys. So
Yeah.
it'll be a very good year.
Be on the
Yeah.
lookout. Also, yeah, check out Jocko Willink on YouTube. Very powerful mindset. I just recommend that as much as Atomic Habits. It's very, very helpful. It can completely reshape your mindset. So I just really recommend taking a look at that.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. So hopefully today was kind of a nice little, refresh check-in
mhm.
episode. Like Ben said, we're going to be still continuing recording episodes with as many different people as possible. We've got more things planned, but hopefully everyone is refreshed and rested after this winter break, and hopefully we can carry this energy into the new year. So that's all we have for today. My name's Ethan.
I'm Ben.
I'm Kabir.
And just remember, your mind matters.